It started like any other Saturday morning. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, spilling across the polished wooden floors and casting a warm, golden glow on the rows of books lining the walls of my library. The air smelled faintly of old paper and polished oak, a comforting scent that always seemed to calm my mind. Each shelf held more than just books. They held pieces of my life, fragments of moments that had defined me over the years. First editions from my youth, carefully signed copies from authors whose words had shaped my thinking, rare volumes passed down from my parents. Each one had a story, a memory, a heartbeat of its own. This room wasn't merely a collection. It was a reflection of my soul, a sanctuary built one book at a time. I was sipping my morning tea, savoring the delicate aroma of chamomile, when a voice called from the kitchen. "Mom," it said, unusually hesitant. It was my son, Arjun. Normally, he would burst into the room with some joke, a story from his week, or a teasing comment about my obsession with color-coded shelves. But this time, his tone was different, heavy, careful, almost cautious. "We need to talk," he said, and there was a weight in his voice that made my heart skip a beat. Setting my cup down on the side table, I tried to steady myself. Something was off. Arjun had never sounded this serious, not even during exams, not even when he had gotten into trouble at school. "What's wrong, Beta?" I asked, my voice a little tighter than usual. I walked into the kitchen, trying to hide the sudden sense of dread that had settled over me. He avoided my gaze, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his sweater. There was a hesitation, a pause, as if he were summoning the courage to speak. Then finally he said, "It's about the library." My heart lurched. "The library? What about it?" "We're donating it," he said calmly, as if he were announcing the most ordinary decision in the world. I froze, blinked. My mind tried to process the words, but they felt wrong. Impossible. Donating my library? What do you mean? Arjun swallowed hard, stealing a glance at my husband, Raj, who had quietly stepped into the kitchen behind him. Raj's expression was unreadable, calm but firm, like he was standing on the side of the decision that had already been made. "We think it's better if someone else enjoys the books," Arjun said. "We've been talking, and we'll contact the charity this week." I laughed, a short, nervous laugh, hoping that would somehow dissolve the moment into a joke. But it didn't. Their faces told me it was not a joke. Every muscle in my body tightened, a wave of disbelief crashing over me. How could they even consider this without speaking to me first? Every book on those shelves had a story, every shelf a memory. To give them away was to erase pieces of my life, to hand over parts of myself to strangers. "I don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. "These books, they're not just objects. They're memories. They're pieces of me. You can't just give them away like that." Arjun tried to soften his words, placing a hand over mine. "Mom, you have plenty of copies at home. And we need space, for renovations." Renovations. That word, so casual, felt like a punch to the gut. I took a shaky breath, my mind spinning. "I don't want to donate them," I said, voice almost breaking. "Not until I know why, not until I have a say in it." But Arjun's resolve was clear. "Mom, I'm sorry. We've already made arrangements. The movers are coming next week." The words felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I walked through the library that afternoon, my fingers brushing along the spines of books I had loved all my life. I read the titles as if their mere names could ground me, remind me that these stories, these objects, belonged to me and me alone. I lingered over old childhood favorites, laughing quietly at annotations I had scribbled decades ago, remembering afternoons spent curled up on the rug with a new novel, the scent of tea and parchment filling the air. And then, as I paused in the far corner of the room, a small, leather-bound notebook caught my eye. It was wedged between two thick encyclopedias, its edges worn, the cover smooth from years of handling, but I didn't remember ever acquiring it. It looked out of place among the familiar tomes, almost as if it had been waiting for me to notice it. With careful hands, I pulled it out. The leather was soft, almost fragile, and the pages inside were yellowed with age. Flipping through them, I realized the handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, deliberate. It wasn't just a notebook. It was a journal, filled with letters, sketches, and notes that hinted at secrets long buried. My pulse quickened as I read a line, then another. The more I turned the pages, the more I sensed that this notebook contained something important, something that could change everything I thought I knew about my family. If the library were donated, if these books were sent off without my knowledge, I might never discover the truth hidden within this fragile volume. My heart raced. I had to act. But how? I couldn't confront Arjun without knowing the full story myself. I had to explore, search, and understand every corner of the library before it was gone forever. As dusk settled over the house, painting the room in a soft amber glow, I carried the notebook to my favorite chair by the window. Outside, the sky deepened to violet, and the first stars began to appear. The library felt alive around me, as though it sensed the urgency, the necessity of my mission. The familiar scent of paper and ink, which had always comforted me, now seemed charged with mystery and possibility. I turned the pages slowly, careful not to tear them. There were sketches of places I recognized but didn't remember visiting, letters addressed to names I hadn't heard in years, and entries that hinted at a story that had been hidden from me all my life. Each word pulled me deeper, and I realized that someone had left this notebook intentionally, for me, to find. But why? Who? And what was the secret that had been buried in plain sight, among these shelves that had been my sanctuary for decades? By the time midnight approached, I was still there, engrossed in the notebook. My tea had gone cold. The house was silent except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, and the library seemed to stretch endlessly around me. I felt a strange mix of fear and excitement, a sense that the life I had known was about to shift in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. Somewhere in this room, among the books I had loved and lived with, lay answers. And I couldn't let them disappear. Not to charity, not to space and renovations, not to anything that would separate me from the truth. I sat back in my chair, holding the notebook tightly, and made a silent vow. I would uncover the story. I would find the secrets hidden among these walls, even if it took days, weeks, or months. This library had been my refuge, my joy, my identity. But now, it had become a gateway to something far greater, something I had never imagined. And whatever awaited me, I was ready. Because once the story revealed itself, there would be no turning back. The following morning, I returned to the library with renewed determination. Arjun had left for work, and Raj was out running errands, leaving me alone with the quiet hum of the house. The sunlight filtered through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced lazily in the warm beams. I carried the leather-bound notebook carefully to the large oak desk in the center of the room, spreading its pages out as if laying them before me might reveal the hidden truths all at once. Each line I read pulled me further into a past I had never known. The handwriting, so delicate yet deliberate, belonged to people who had walked our family history long before I was born. Letters addressed to my mother, my grandmother, and curiously, to me, though the handwriting was unfamiliar and elegant. Each page told stories that felt both intimate and monumental. Secret romances that had been carefully concealed, business dealings whose impact rippled through generations, travels that spanned continents, and encounters with people who had vanished from our family narrative without explanation. I lingered over a passage that described a summer in Venice, where my grandmother had traveled secretly with a man named Elias. There were sketches of canals, faintly annotated with cryptic notes in the margins. Another letter hinted at a clandestine meeting in Paris, where arrangements for an inheritance were apparently made. My pulse quickened as I realized that the family I thought I knew was only a fraction of the story. Each entry in the notebook seemed to whisper that there were layers beneath the surface, layers my grandmother had carefully shielded from view. And then I found it, a letter addressed to my late grandmother, written by someone named Elias. The handwriting was strong, flowing, yet meticulous. My breath caught when I read a particular line. The truth lies hidden behind the wall in the library. Only when the time is right shall it be revealed. Behind the wall? My pulse raced. Could it be true? My grandmother had always been a woman of secrets, meticulous and careful, never revealing too much. And now, decades later, it seemed her secrets were literally embedded in this very room, waiting to be uncovered. I began my search meticulously, moving from one shelf to the next. I tapped the wooden walls, inspected the seams between bookshelves, and ran my fingers along the edges of cabinets. Hours passed. I ignored the rumbling of my stomach, the warmth of the afternoon sun shifting across the floors. Every detail seemed significant. The way a shelf didn't quite align, the faint difference in wood grain, the faintest gap where dust had collected. Then, almost by accident, I found it, a narrow seam between two bookshelves, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. My hands trembled as I pressed, pushed, and finally heard the subtle click of a hidden latch releasing. The shelf swung open silently, revealing a small hidden compartment carved into the wall. Inside, nestled carefully, was a wooden box. It was old and fragile, with a patina that spoke of decades, perhaps a century of careful storage. I lifted it out gently, mindful of its weight and the history it seemed to carry. I opened the box slowly, as if it were breathing along with me. Inside were letters, old photographs, and documents that appeared older than anything in my memory, some of them over 100 years old. Some letters were personal, written in delicate cursive and tied with faded ribbons. Others were official papers, stamped and sealed, detailing long-lost properties, unclaimed inheritances, and complex family agreements that hinted at a web of relationships far more intricate than I had ever imagined. Among the documents was a photograph that froze me in place. A young man, tall and elegant, stood in formal attire, his eyes strikingly familiar. My breath caught as I realized the resemblance to Arjun. It was uncanny. A small note attached to the photo read simply, "For the future. When the time is right, she must know." My hands shook as I absorbed the implications. Could this be part of our family history deliberately concealed, waiting for someone to discover it? What secrets had been preserved behind this wall, and why had my grandmother chosen to hide them so carefully? The sudden sound of the front door opening startled me. I quickly closed the box, pressing it against my chest, and slipped it under the desk just as Arjun walked in, cheerful and unsuspecting. "Mom," he said, his voice bright, "I told the movers to come next week. Are you okay with everything?" I forced a smile, carefully masking the racing of my heart. "Of course, Beta," I said softly. I need a few more days to go through everything. These books mean a lot to me, you know." Arjun nodded, seemingly satisfied. He had no idea of the discovery I had just made, no idea of the hidden layer of history nestled in our home. And yet, I knew I couldn't wait. The library was more than a room of books. It was a vault of our family's hidden truths. I had stumbled onto something extraordinary, and I was determined to explore every secret before it was gone. As the day faded into evening, I remained in the library, surrounded by the warm glow of lamplight and the familiar scent of old paper. Shadows stretched along the walls, and the room, usually comforting, now seemed alive with anticipation. Every book, every shelf, every corner seemed to whisper possibilities. The donations scheduled for next week suddenly felt like a threat, not just to my collection, but to the very history of my family. I opened the notebook once more, scanning the letters and sketches with renewed focus. There were hints of other hidden compartments, coded references, and cryptic instructions that suggested our family's story was far from fully revealed. Each line beckoned me deeper, promising revelations, perhaps even danger, but also the satisfaction of uncovering truths long buried. By the time darkness had fallen outside, the library had become my world. I could hear the distant hum of traffic beyond the windows, the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind, but inside, time seemed suspended. I realized then that the donation of this library could erase more than just physical books. It could erase the very threads that connected generations of our family. And I was not about to let that happen. I made another silent vow. I would uncover every secret, explore every hidden corner, and understand every letter, every photograph, every document. The library was no longer just a room of memories. It was a map, a puzzle, a treasure trove of truths that had waited decades for the right moment to reveal themselves. And now that moment was mine. No matter what it took, I would not let the history of my family slip quietly into the hands of strangers. Because some secrets, I realized, were meant to be discovered, not forgotten. Over the next few days, I immersed myself completely in the library. Each morning, I would arrive with a fresh cup of tea, a notebook in one hand, and determination in the other. The house was quiet, Raj often out on errands, Arjun at work, leaving me alone with the silent hum of the library. Every shelf, every book, every dusty corner became a potential clue. The room, once a sanctuary of comfort, had transformed into a labyrinth of mysteries, and I was its dedicated explorer. The leather-bound notebook guided me through this journey. Every page held cryptic references. Mentions of hidden compartments, forgotten keys tucked behind old volumes, coded messages written in the margins of letters. It was like following a map drawn long ago, one that had only revealed itself now, when the time was right. Each clue pulled me deeper into a history I had never known, and every discovery brought a mixture of excitement and unease. One morning, while running my fingers along a shelf devoted to rare poetry collections, I came across a passage that made my heart race. The notebook spoke of a manuscript my grandmother had hidden, described as containing the truth of our family's legacy. It was never cataloged, never noted in any inventory, almost as if it had been deliberately erased from memory. I searched tirelessly, moving shelves, pulling books from their places, tapping walls, and pressing against panels that seemed slightly misaligned. Hours passed, the sunlight shifting across the floorboards, until finally, my persistence paid off. I discovered a false bottom in one of the bookshelves, a delicate trick of craftsmanship, carefully concealed. Beneath it lay a rolled manuscript tied with a faded ribbon. My hands trembled as I lifted it, careful not to tear the fragile paper. I untied the ribbon and unfurled the parchment, revealing a diary, its pages yellowed and edges brittle with age. The handwriting was elaborate, precise, and elegant, a record of secrets written to endure generations. As I read, I realized the diary chronicled the hidden veins of our family's history. Marriages arranged for convenience, adoptions that had remained secret, business dealings that had shaped wealth and influence, and personal sacrifices that had been quietly made to protect reputations. There were mentions of long-lost estates, unclaimed inheritances, and influential figures whose decisions had left invisible marks on our family's trajectory. Some secrets had clearly been preserved to shield us from scandal. Others seemed to exist simply as markers of legacy, intended to be discovered only by those who sought them. The deeper I read, the more I understood the weight of what had been hidden. Every revelation seemed to ripple outward, connecting generations in ways I had never imagined. Each story spoke of careful decisions, sometimes harsh, sometimes protective, but always deliberate. I felt as though my grandmother's voice was guiding me, urging me to see the full picture before it slipped away entirely. And then I stumbled upon something that made my hands freeze over the diary. A passage described a child who had been adopted into our family decades ago, a decision made quietly and intentionally, shielded from the knowledge of later generations. The description, the dates, even the little details, the mannerisms, the birth circumstances, all matched Arjun perfectly. My mind reeled. Could it be true? Could my son's entire life, everything I had known about him, have been shaped by choices made long before he was born? I sat back, the diary resting heavily in my lap. A whirlwind of questions and emotions spun through my mind. Why had this been hidden? Why now, after all these years, had the secret surfaced? And most importantly, how would I handle the revelation without overwhelming Arjun, without shattering the life we had built together? I knew I had to proceed carefully. The library had become more than a sanctuary. It was now a vault of family history, a treasure trove that demanded preservation and understanding. I began cataloging everything meticulously, photographing letters, scanning documents, and making detailed notes of dates, names, and connections. Every discovery was recorded, every clue cross-referenced with another. The sense of urgency grew with each passing day. The scheduled donation of the library suddenly felt like a threat, a potential erasure of history that I could not allow. When Arjun came home that evening, I carefully broached the subject, keeping my voice calm while hinting at the discoveries. "You might be surprised by what we find in this library, Beta," I said gently. "There are things here you've never imagined." He leaned casually against the doorway, curiosity piqued. "Like what?" he asked, his eyebrows raised. I smiled, a mix of excitement and anxiety flickering across my face. "You'll see soon enough. But first, we need to slow down any donations. These books, they hold more than stories. They hold our history. The library isn't just a room. It's a record of who we are, where we came from, and the people who shaped our family in ways we don't yet fully understand." Arjun nodded, still unaware of the depth of my discoveries. He seemed satisfied for the moment, but I knew better. Time was slipping, and the library could not wait. Every hidden compartment, every letter, every manuscript might hold pieces of the puzzle that would explain not just our family's past, but perhaps the very identity of the people in it. That night, as I sat surrounded by stacks of letters and documents, I realized that the hidden manuscript was more than a revelation. It was a responsibility. The past, carefully recorded and concealed, now rested in my hands. I could feel the weight of generations pressing down on me, the expectation that I would preserve, understand, and when the time came, share the truth. For the first time, I also felt a flicker of fear. What if the secrets I uncovered disrupted the lives of those I loved? What if Arjun, or even Raj, reacted poorly to the truths I was beginning to uncover? The library had always been a place of comfort, a sanctuary from the world. But now it had become a landscape of uncertainty, where every discovery carried both potential and peril. Still, I resolved to continue. The diary, the letters, the hidden compartments, they were not simply curiosities. They were evidence of the decisions, sacrifices, and lives that had built the family I knew. To ignore them, to allow them to vanish with a donation, would be to erase everything. I tucked the diary carefully into a protective folder, making a mental note of every location I needed to examine next. There were still other references in the leather-bound notebook, clues to letters I had yet to find, boxes I had yet to open, and stories I had yet to uncover. As I closed the library door that night, the house silent around me, I felt a profound sense of purpose. The hidden legacy of my family was mine to protect, mine to uncover, and eventually perhaps mine to share. The library was no longer simply a room of books. It was a living record, a labyrinth of truths waiting to be understood. And I would not let it be lost. The next morning, I called Arjun to the library, pretending it was just for a casual talk. The house was quiet, the faint aroma of morning coffee lingering in the air. I held the hidden manuscript carefully under my arm, trying to steady the excitement that fluttered in my chest. Arjun's footsteps approached, and he appeared in the doorway, curious and unsuspecting. "I want to show you something," I said, my voice calm but carrying a hint of anticipation. His eyes lit up immediately. "What is it, Mom?" I smiled faintly, leading him toward the rare poetry shelf. "Just something I found. I think you'll want to see this." Slowly, carefully, I revealed the hidden compartment. The shelf swung open, and the small wooden box, worn with age, came into view. I set it gently on the desk and pulled out the manuscript. Arjun leaned closer, his eyes widening as they took in the letters, the photographs, and the carefully rolled parchments. "Mom, what is all this?" he whispered, his voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. I handed him the manuscript, letting him turn the pages with trembling fingers. Each one revealed secrets, histories, and long-forgotten stories written in elegant handwriting. The first few pages described marriages, adoptions, and family arrangements I had only just begun to comprehend. These are about our family?" Arjun asked, his voice shaking slightly as he absorbed the information. "Yes, Beta," I said softly, trying to stay calm despite the flood of emotions inside me. "This is our history. Some of it was hidden for reasons we may never fully understand. But it belongs to us, and we need to know it before we let anyone else take it away." We spent hours reading together, uncovering revelation after revelation. The letters detailed lost inheritances, secret marriages, and business dealings that had shaped the family fortune. There were accounts of travels to distant continents, encounters with influential figures, and even threats from rivals who had sought to harm our ancestors decades ago. Every page revealed another layer, each more complex than the last. The realization hit us slowly but surely. Our family's story was far more intricate and far more fascinating than we had ever imagined. Arjun's face reflected a mixture of astonishment and curiosity. "I had no idea," he said softly. "I thought I knew our family, but this is incredible." And then came the most personal discovery, the one that made my heart pound and my hands shake. A series of letters hinted at a child who had been carefully chosen for something extraordinary, a legacy passed down through generations. One letter, addressed to my late grandmother, described a child who would carry the family name forward and safeguard certain heirlooms and documents until the right time. As Arjun read the description, his eyes widened. The details, the birth circumstances, the personality traits, even the timing, matched him almost perfectly. "Mom, are you saying this is about me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Beta," I said, my own voice trembling slightly. "You were meant to find this library, to protect these secrets, and to carry on our legacy. That's why I couldn't let it be donated without knowing what was inside. These books aren't just stories, they're our family's life. And now, you are part of it in a way neither of us fully understood before." For a moment, silence filled the room. Arjun sat down slowly, absorbing the weight of this revelation. I watched him carefully, unsure how he was processing it all. Then, after a long pause, he smiled, nervous, hesitant, but genuine. "Wow, I didn't know any of this," he said. "No wonder you were so protective of this library. It's amazing." We spent the rest of the day exploring the letters, photographs, and manuscripts. Each item revealed something new. Relatives we had never met, marriages that had been kept secret, property disputes, even hints of lives that had been lived entirely apart from the rest of the family. Some discoveries were shocking, others heartwarming, but all of them were illuminating. Together, we began piecing together a family tree, sketching connections between names, dates, and places. The library, once merely a room of books, had transformed into a living archive of our history. Every letter, every photograph, every manuscript was a thread in the tapestry of our lineage. I noticed Arjun studying a photograph of a young man who bore a striking resemblance to him. "Mom, he looks like me," he said softly, tracing the edges of the image. "Yes, Beta," I replied. "That's part of our legacy. That photograph, like the others, was meant to be discovered when the time was right. You're connected to this family in ways you're only beginning to understand." The room seemed alive with history as we read. The letters whispered stories of courage, of difficult decisions, of sacrifices made to protect the family from scandal or danger. I felt my grandmother's presence in the margins, guiding us, waiting for the moment we were ready to understand. By the evening, the library felt almost magical. The sunlight had faded, replaced by the soft glow of lamps and the golden flicker of a candle. The books were no longer mere objects. They were carriers of stories, guardians of secrets, and the vessels of a legacy that had been entrusted to us. Arjun turned to me, his expression serious yet inspired. "Mom, I get it now. This library, it can't go anywhere. Not yet. We need to understand everything first." I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. "Exactly, Beta. It's our duty to protect it, not just for ourselves, but for the generations that come after us. These stories, these documents, this legacy, it's ours to preserve. And we will together." For the first time, I felt a profound sense of clarity. The library had been a sanctuary for decades, but it was now something more, a bridge between the past and the present, a guardian of memories, and a testament to the lives that had come before us. Arjun and I were no longer just observers. We were participants, entrusted with a responsibility greater than we had ever imagined. That night, as the house settled into quiet darkness, we remained in the library, surrounded by decades of history. The manuscripts lay open before us, letters scattered across the desk, photographs tucked carefully between pages. Each discovery reinforced a single truth. The library was more than a collection of books. It was a legacy, and we were its keepers. And for the first time, I felt certain of one thing. The story of our family was only just beginning to reveal itself, and we were ready to uncover every hidden secret, every long-buried truth, before the world could take it away. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of discovery and meticulous work. Arjun and I dedicated every free moment to the library, combing through the shelves, carefully cataloging the letters, manuscripts, and photographs, and photographing each item to preserve a digital record. The sheer weight of history we uncovered was staggering. We realized, with growing urgency, that donating the books before uncovering the family secrets would have meant losing them forever. Each volume held threads of a story that had taken decades, sometimes centuries, to weave. The library, once a quiet sanctuary filled with the scent of aged paper, had transformed into a living archive, alive with the echoes of generations past. Every page we examined seemed to hum with a story, a memory, a life carefully preserved. I marveled at the foresight of those who had hidden these secrets so deliberately, knowing that one day someone in the family would need to discover them. And now, that responsibility had fallen to us. We sought help from experts to understand the more cryptic elements of the collection. Historians and archivists were called in, letters written in French, German, and even older languages translated with painstaking care. Old property deeds were verified, ensuring that what the manuscripts described was more than legend, it was fact. Maps were traced, photographs analyzed, and connections drawn between names that had seemed meaningless until now. Arjun's fascination with the library deepened with each revelation. He had always loved books, but now he began to see them as more than objects. They were gateways to the past, keys to understanding our family, and reminders of the legacies that had been entrusted to us. I watched him carefully handle the fragile documents, his respect and reverence for history evident in every gesture. One afternoon, Raj joined us, carrying a tray of tea. He paused at the doorway, taking in the organized chaos of papers, photographs, and manuscripts spread across the table. His eyes widened, and he let out a soft whistle. "I had no idea," he said, his voice filled with awe. "This library, it's incredible. I understand now why you've always been so protective of it." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest. "It's more than just a collection of books," I said. "It's our history, our secrets, our legacy. And now, Arjun has a part in it too. He's helping preserve everything for the future. Arjun grinned, flipping through an old family photograph of people whose names we were only just learning. Mom, he said thoughtfully, we should make a plan. This library deserves to be shared one day, but carefully. Not just donated to anyone. We can preserve the stories while letting people appreciate the books and what they represent. That evening, we sat together in the library, the sunlight streaming through the tall windows and casting a golden glow across the shelves. The room seemed to breathe with the life of stories and secrets revealed. For the first time, the library felt like more than a room. It felt like a living testament to the family that had built it, preserved it, and entrusted it to us. I realized something profound as I looked around. The library had given me more than knowledge. It had given me a renewed connection with my family, especially with Arjun. Our bond deepened as we worked together, uncovering the stories that had shaped us long before we were born. We laughed, we marveled, and sometimes we sat in silence, letting the weight of the history settle around us. Weeks passed, and the scheduled arrival of the movers loomed ever closer. When the day finally arrived, I met them at the door with a calm, polite demeanor. "I'm sorry," I said firmly. "The donation is postponed indefinitely." Their surprise was evident, but they nodded, understanding that the request was final. The library was staying, for now, and perhaps forever. I watched as Arjun moved carefully through the room, locking the hidden compartments one by one, placing the manuscripts, letters, and photographs back exactly where they belonged. "It's safe now," he said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet sense of accomplishment. "Yes, Beta," I said, hugging him tightly, feeling the bond between us strengthen in a way words could not capture. "And someday, when the time is right, the world can know our story. But for now, it stays with us." That night, after the house had settled into stillness, I sat alone in the library, the leather-bound notebook resting in my lap. The very notebook that had started it all. I traced the elegant handwriting with my fingers, marveling at how much history, love, and foresight it held. I realized then that what we had thought were ordinary books had been quietly protecting extraordinary secrets for generations. Each page, each note, each photograph had been carefully preserved, waiting for someone with the patience and curiosity to uncover it. As I looked around the room, the shelves now orderly yet brimming with the weight of stories, I felt a profound sense of peace. The library would remain, the legacy would endure, and my family, my son and I, had become its guardians. We were now the caretakers of a history that had been hidden for decades, and I understood the significance of this responsibility fully. I thought back to that morning when Arjun had casually mentioned donating the library. I had been shocked, fearful, and heartbroken at the thought of losing it. But now, I saw it for what it had truly been. The catalyst that had drawn us into a deeper understanding of our family, of who we were, and of the history we were meant to preserve. What had seemed like an ordinary collection of books had transformed into a treasure beyond measure. In that quiet, golden-lit room, surrounded by generations of stories, letters, and manuscripts, I made another vow to myself. The library would never be empty again, not in spirit, not in memory, and not in purpose. It was more than a collection of books. It was a bridge across time, a witness to the lives that had come before us, and a gift for the generations yet to come. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the comforting weight of the past around me, and whispered softly to the room, to the books, to the generations of ancestors whose work had brought us here. "We will protect you. We will honor you. And your story will live on." And in that moment, I knew it was true. The library had given me a second chance, not only to discover its secrets, but to preserve the very soul of my family.